Humanex Ventures presents Inside the Coaching Mind. Terry Pettit coached the University of Nebraska's first national championship team in 1995 and put the state of Nebraska on a path to volleyball greatness. Now, Terry mentors coaches, writes books, and gives talks about leadership and team building to corporate and business audiences. Here's Coach Pettit to take us inside the coaching mind.
Thank you, David Young, and thank Brad Black and Humanex Ventures, an organization that recruits, develops, and mentors extraordinary coaches. And our guest today is an extraordinary coach. Jaylen Reyes is the director of recruiting for Nebraska Volleyball, an assistant coach. And I'm going to put this in perspective. We've had Karch Karai on and John Cook and Jordan Larson. When I announced that Jaylen was going to be the guest, we had 3 times the response than we've had to any other guest, which tells me how much you are like Jaylen, that everybody in Nebraska wants to be Jaylen's friend. And,
wow. Well, I don't really know what to say to that. I'm maybe you're catching me at a great time because obviously our team's doing very well. And maybe we're just the topic of the moment. But those I'm not sure if I'm quite the level that those 3 names you just brought up, as well as yourself, Coach.
Well, I think it's something else. And David's sister, Barbie, who's a physician in O'Neill, Nebraska, told me a story where I think 7 or 8 years ago, your father came to O'Neill, Nebraska for USA Volleyball to run a camp. And he stayed with Barbie and her husband and in a room below them, and they heard a noise. And she went downstairs, and your father, Tino, was playing the ukulele and singing very softly. And what a pleasant image that is.
That doesn't shock me at all, if I'm being upfront with you, Coach. I knew about the camp, but once you said he was sitting in the room, I'm like, let me guess. He was probably laying down, playing the ukulele, playing like the 4 songs he knows over and over again. So that's whenever I get to go home, sometimes me and my dad will like have a beach day and we'll go to like a random beach and then we'll go to another beach and we'll go to another beach, kind of chasing the surf. And anytime we're like waiting in the car, he's just like strumming and singing to himself. So that doesn't shock me. And he never he doesn't go anywhere without that thing. He's this like stereotypical Hawaiian, if I'm being honest.
Well, that's wonderful. And Jaylen, I didn't know that you had a podcast of your own, because I Googled podcasts where you were a guest, but you have a very successful podcast called Serve and Volley. And I listened to a couple episodes last night. It's wonderful. And basically you talk about matches that Nebraska just played or an upcoming match and things like that. How long have you been doing that?
I want to say we started, Coach, at the beginning of the Big Ten season. 93.7 The Ticket here in Lincoln approached me. They're trying to I kind of go right after Coach Manning. Wrestling kind of has theirs for an hour. And then actually Peter Kobot, the head coach of the men's tennis team, sometimes goes either the hour after me or the hour before, just to bring attention. I also just kind of felt honored. Like, wow, people care about what the assistant volleyball coach wants to talk about. And, I have a bunch of buddies that listen to it every week and they usually text in questions and stuff like that. But I don't know, just talking volleyball. I don't know how much knowledge I have to share, but I also thought it was really, really good practice for me. Growing up, I never thought I was a great public speaker. So I just thought it'd be something to kind of get myself out of my own comfort zone and something that I need to prepare for. I feel like for volleyball or recruiting, I have a routine of how to prepare going into certain things or certain events. But this is just a whole new world in terms of, working with the, production crew and us kind of talking about maybe we usually film on Tuesdays. So on the Monday, talking about what we want to talk about, recapping, the week before, talking about the big time, what's coming up that week or, there's something, so for an example, 2 weeks ago was signing week. So last week we talked about the recruits we signed. So, and I don't know, I just think at the end of the day, it's great publicity for the program. And, the more and more we get people talking about volleyball, the better it is for our sport in general, no matter who it is. So I also felt like it was kind of like a public service I could do, if that makes sense.
Well, I sense that you're service oriented, Jaylen, and I think that's one of the reasons that people want to be around you, want to be your friend. It probably impacts why you're a successful recruiter. I'm going to ask several questions here that aren't my questions. They're questions that people that follow this podcast wanted me to ask you. In recruiting, how much how much do you talk about revenue sharing, or do incoming freshman recruits, is that an issue? And how much is it an issue with, say, somebody in the portal?
Yeah, that's a great question. We'll go high school recruiting so far. I feel like volleyball is going that direction. It's it's a very different world compared to what you hear in the media when it comes to football and men's basketball. So nothing, I would be shocked if any sport besides those two sports are similar. So with high school kids, purely because we're typically recruiting them so far away. I mean, they're, most of the time they're finishing their sophomore year when we're actually recruiting and offering them scholarships to come to Nebraska. It's not as, I would say, if they had 8 questions the first time we talked to them, it might be question 7 or 8, on average. And now that NIL and revenue share has been kind of a thing for 4 or 5 years, especially revenue sharing just kind of recently started the last couple of seasons. It's not been in the top 5 with the kids we've been recruiting. And if I'm being upfront, I kind of like that, the fact that, hey, they're going to be, I think every volleyball player here at Nebraska is going to be compensated very, very well. You can define very, very well differently depending on who the player is. But I don't know. I wouldn't want someone to just pick Nebraska because we can compensate them very well financially. I think that's a big plus. But for us, I also feel like if money is their only motivating factor to get better and to help us win and to help build this program, I feel like this program wasn't built on, hey, you come here and we can give you this. I feel like it's built on hard work. It's built on tradition. It's built on celebrating the past and making, Coach Cook used to always say, making the jersey you receive your freshman year better by the time you turn it in when you're a senior, and
That's a very
and I'm
insightful.
assuming that you probably gave that to him, Coach, but I feel like for us, it's, to be totally blind and not talk about it is, I think, naive. And I think there's a little bit of, you'll get passed up if you try to ignore it, or some of the coaches that try to fight it in any sport, I think they're going to get passed up because it is a topic. But for us with high school kids, it really hasn't been a huge driving factor. Of course, I think they know in the back of their minds, hey, we can be really well compensated at Nebraska, but it's not a, hey, we're talking within 20 minutes, we're talking about money and revenue share. So it's not as prevalent. Go ahead, Coach.
Well, let's move on to this then. Let's say that you've seen an athlete play several times. She has the size, the arm speed, the vision, and you can ask her 2 questions. Just 2 questions that are going to give you some insight as to whether or not she would be a great fit for the culture at Nebraska. What are 2 questions you would ask?
I think the first one would be is, my biggest thing too is, what is this person? And maybe, Coach, is it okay if I expand this question to even the parents too? Because I feel like they're a huge influence, especially nowadays with how involved parents are.
Yeah.
I mean, so much so we're looking, of course, talent wise, but we're looking at how do the parents behave? How are the parents in conversations? One, do they even let their daughter do the talking, or they're the ones doing the talking? But I would say the first question is kind of what they're looking for. I know that's such a vague question, but what are you looking for in this experience? I think it's a vague question, but for me, it's seeing which way they go to answer. If they're talking about, wanting to be a great volleyball player and wanting to make, the Olympic team and wanting to, play in front of, a million fans and stuff like that. That's kind of where we lead to. And then, if they start talking about, if their first thing off the top of their mind is talking about, how they can be paid and stuff like that, for us, that's kind of a turnoff to a degree, just because of, I'm just a big believer, if money's your only motivating factor, and if playing time is your only important factor, there's no guarantees you come here and play right away. There's no guarantees that, if I'm being honest, sometimes with how deep our team can be, it's really hard to come in and play as a freshman, so are you willing to grind it out? We're looking for signs that this person is willing to grind and willing to work hard. And, if you get to play as a freshman, great. But are you willing to put in the time so that way, if you don't get to achieve what you want to achieve as a freshman, are you going to be willing to stick it out and try to work to earn that starting spot, even if it takes, 2 or 3 years?
Well, Jaylen, you said something on your own podcast that I think ties into that. There's a difference between energy and attention to detail. You want to talk about that a little bit? What's the difference in energy and attention to detail? Because I think when teams are playing really well, there's great attention to detail.
For sure. Attention to detail for me is a big, big thing, whether it's, hey, the attention to detail in practice, the attention to detail in a match. You could use the word focus, but I like attention to detail because I feel like it's way more honed in. But I think understanding attention to detail is like the understanding of what's important at the right time to affect winning, to get better. Even in a simple form like a drill. We're working on a passing drill. Maybe we're working on getting our arms out early. The attention to detail of, hey, the intention of this drill is to get your arms out early, your platform out early. Who are the kids that are actually doing those things, or are they just kind of looking at it from this broad perspective? And I feel like the kids that can attack the specific details that you're asking them to attack, those are the ones that continue to get better, or so much so, they're the ones that they're not super fixated or focused on the nonsense or the riffraff that's going on, versus, hey, they're super focused. We talk about at Nebraska talking about having a next point mentality. So the kids that have great attention to detail, they're able to, okay, this is all going on. Okay, maybe I'm not playing well. Okay, maybe I just got blocked. But in this next scenario, that doesn't matter anymore. What do I need to do to affect the next point to give us the best chance to win the next point? And that attention to detail might be different for a Virginia Adriano to an Olivia Mock to a Bergen Riley, right? Attention to detail might necessarily be, all 6 players might not be solely fixated on something, but there's like a certain phase of the game to where, hey, in this moment, this is important and this is no longer important. And it might be as simple as, if I'm an out-of-system blocker, can I just have my eyes on the set for a long period of time? If I'm a floor defender, in that specific situation, while the blockers are fixated on the set, can I be seeing the attacker and the set to make sure I'm in the correct position to put myself in a great position to dig a volleyball? So I feel like when we're playing at our best, all the players, they have great attention to detail, but that might look different depending on which role you're in.
Yeah, and where I see it, Jaylen, in coverage, it's fairly easy for the person closest to the attacker or the setter, because she knows where the ball's going, to move into position. It's where I see that break down on teams, it's maybe the off attackers. Let's say somebody was running a slide, the ball's passed off the net. Does that person get off the net to cover deep, the ball that's blocked deep?
Exactly.
So that's one of the things as a fan of volleyball that I look for in that situation. Nebraska played at Indiana, and I didn't watch the match, until attention was brought to it about two hecklers that were moving wherever the server was. And Jaylen, I'd never seen this before. I've seen people in hot tubs. I've seen at Texas, I've seen a swim team disrobe. I've seen people with megaphones, but I've never seen in an arena where hecklers could actually approach the person serving and yell at them right behind them. And it didn't appear to impact Nebraska because they were disciplined enough. What did you think when you saw that?
Yeah, if one, I think some of the to defend the Indiana student section, one, it was a great atmosphere, so
Good.
I think with great atmospheres, some of that comes with it. And I think, I'm not going to excuse certain things people yell at student athletes or athletes in general, because I didn't hear all of that, so I'm not going to accuse anybody. I think the TV angles and some of the angles you see on social media, they make them appear closer than they are. If I'm being upfront, one that sometimes before the games on the road, because sometimes we only have a locker room for the girls, so there's nowhere for us, especially us male coaches, to go. So I usually just go out on the court pretty early, and maybe I'll just kind of, it's an hour and 15 minutes before the match. There's no one out on the court. Maybe me and one of our grad managers will pepper a little bit. There's a lot more room there than you thought. So some of the angles on social media make them appear a lot closer. They were definitely walking over and following. If somebody was serving from our zone 5, they'd walk over to left back, and if someone was serving from zone 1, they'd walk over. I'm one that operates under, hey, the saying of dogs don't bark at parked cars. So what that means is, hey, guys, there's a reason they're walking over there and yelling at you. We could be other teams and we show up and they're not even there because it's not a big match, because you're quote unquote a parked car. So a moving car is one that's successful, that gets a reaction out of people, that, garners the attention. So I always kind of look at it that way. Again, I'm not really sure what was said and stuff like that, but
Jaylen,
I think that's also just part of college sports and all that. So I don't know. I know I sound like I'm defending the Indiana fans and stuff like that.
No. You're adding an important perspective, and I really appreciate it, because you're correct. On social media, it looked like they were whispering or yelling in the ear of the player. So that's good. That's good to know. I don't know that I've ever seen somebody not seated, though, that where they physically were moving back and forth.
Right.
So I think
and the barrier is close to the student section too on that side, so it gives them the access. Normally, people's student sections are kind of, they're either off to the side or they're just further away. So I don't know. It was one of those. I also think too, a lot of places this year, when we've shown up, it's been a zoo. I mean, part of Lindsey Peterson or Wishmeyer's job, part of that with some of the security that we fly with, is kind of helping the road staffs organize, because I don't think a lot of schools necessarily aren't ready for the fan exposure that we're going to receive. And I'm not saying other teams don't, but I would be shocked if some of these gyms, there's another team that brings the same level of attention. So much so where they're having to barricade the door exiting the gym that we leave to the bus, like a pathway, so that way fans don't just come and mob the girls and ask for autographs and pictures and stuff like that. So I think there's also a little bit of security necessarily isn't ready, because I don't think they've seen and to defend all the other schools this year. I mean, we've always got a lot of attention. This season, for some reason, it's doubled or tripled in terms of the, crowds are lined up 2.5, 3 hours before the game. We have fans kind of surrounding the warm-up courts to where they need ropes to block us off, just to have, an hour before the game, walk out and the setters warm up. We need like security to walk the setters and Danny back and forth to the locker room. It's been crazy this year.
Jaylen, there are things happening that seem otherworldly to me. For example, Danny announced the other day that she's an ambassador for a professional league. I can't imagine Mike Krzyzewski when he was at Duke announcing that he was an ambassador for the Boston Celtics.
Right.
I don't quite know how all that fits, but I appreciate your insight into that. I'm going to move on to some Nebraska players. How did Bergen Riley go from being a good defensive player to an extraordinary defensive player? She covers tips. A lot of setters cheat. They come up the line. She doesn't. She's able to dig a ball, hit hard down the line, and also cover the tip. That doesn't happen just overnight.
No.
How did she get so good?
I think she's been throughout her career, she's been pretty good at it. I know that was something that when she was playing for Coach Cook the last couple of years, we really, really trained, and we still do. So I think a lot of it is just we're talking about attention to detail, and I think for a setter, and Coach, you would probably have more info on this than I would, but as a setter, you're having to handle, you can argue the attention to detail is probably the most important trait of a setter, besides the fact that, hey, can they help you win? But you're for a setter, you're having to go from phase to phase of a game, and not just, okay, we're on offense and now we're on defense, but you have to serve and then you have to go play defense. Oh, the ball comes over. Now I'm in offense. I'm in transition offense. Okay, we're receiving in row 4, right? So, okay, it's first ball side out, but it's row 4. Where do I have people? Okay, is Tariah Sigler passing? Is T. Sigler passing? Okay, is she isn't, then maybe she's available on the BIC. There's so much detail that Bergen or any setter is having to go through during a game. She is so good now to where she's able to get on to the next thing quickly. So you're asking about how is she able to become a really good defender? I think one, she's able to, if she's struggling in a certain phase of the game, she doesn't let that bleed into other phases of the game. I feel like young players, for an outside hitter, if they're not attacking well, they let that affect their serving and passing if they're a 6 rotation outside hitter. Or, hey, if I'm a 3 rotation opposite and I don't kill a ball, I might not, I struggle to get back to the net to be able to block and transition. Bergen is really good about, hey, if she's struggling in a certain phase, and struggling for her is it looks different than struggling for some other people, but she's really good about, hey, I'm going to get back. And when I'm playing defense, I'm playing defense. I'm not a setter. I'm a defender. And I think she looks at it that way. I think the one thing that she's taken a lot of pride in is she wants to be a great setter, but she also wants to be a great volleyball player, right? So she wants to have a great serve. She wants to be a great defender. She doesn't like the narrative that setters can't play defense. She wants to be as good at.
Let me move ahead here to a tactical issue. I think Nebraska is the deepest program this year in the country. And you have 2 exceptional middle attackers. If Bergen digs the ball, you pretty much remove quick attack out of the middle. So if I'm a team and I'm playing Nebraska, every team's going into it thinking, I've got to serve tougher than we have all season.
Yep.
We're going to take some risk because we probably can't side out with Nebraska if we don't. Secondly, I'm going to have to attack Bergen, even though she can dig all these balls, because it removes attack from Rebecca and Andy. So the question in my mind is, if somebody's successful doing that, either Olivia or Choboy has to step in and set the second ball. Who's going to be more effective on the right side? Is that going to be Virginia, or is that going to be your other right side player? Virginia or Allie. And Allie hasn't played much. Is she prepared to have a big night if that happens?
Yeah. I mean, that's one thing that we've been balancing for sure. And we understand if teams are going to try to do that. Um, you know, a tactical play for any team is if you can't kill the ball, try to take out the setter. The one nice thing about our setter, like you mentioned, she's a really good defender. So it's not, hey, if you hit it back there, it's automatically a kill, which I know a lot of other teams, if you hit it back there, they're not even in transition offense because they're not digging the ball anyway. We do spend.
Your setter is second on your team in digs.
Yeah.
Digs.
I mean,
okay. So she plays like a libero. But
yes.
the question is, against a Texas-style block, against a teams that can compete for a national championship, which player is going to be the most successful offensively transitioning from the right side?
Right. Right now, I would say Virginia, and the reason is, Coach, if you watch people that watch us play, Virginia's set in system from Bergen on a perfect pass is closer to a high ball anyway, versus Allie loves playing that like super fast paced set off the setters. So when Allie's at a system, she's getting better, and I think she's had a nice year doing it. But I think Virginia is a little more capable because she has a little more range at a system. And one, I think to a degree for her, the game doesn't change as much if Olivia's setting her. And Olivia and Lainey set her a little higher than Bergen does, but it's not as drastic of a change as, hey, when we pass well and we're going to set Allie on the right, Allie tends to hit a little bit of a faster, flatter set. But when Olivia and Lainey set her, she hits more of the Virginia style set. They're both really talented and stuff like that. I just feel like Virginia has a little more range out of system. The only part of the game that would change in that situation is you'd like to think the block is going to be a little more dialed in. One, like how you mentioned, because we cannot set the middle in those situations, and the set's a little higher. But for the most part, Virginia has a little more range right now than Allie does out of system.
There's two questions that you raised there. Throughout the year, you've alternated liberos. They're both extraordinary. And then the other one plays DS. But at some point here, whoever plays libero is playing next to the left side attacker in the front row. So they're either playing next to Taylor or they're playing next to Harper. At some point, is there value in having the same player there so that you know who can take what balls? That's my. This is a 3-part question, Jaylen.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that's the first part.
Go for it.
So that you're more comfortable. Secondly, why is no one in the country having the libero set a bic off that? In other words, Bergen digs the ball. Why isn't Olivia setting Harper a pipe? Why is that not happening?
That's a great question. I would say your first part of the question, there definitely is some value in, not just a libero and that relationship, but just having a stable starting lineup for sure. And I know they both play no matter what, so they're both starters, but one wearing the same one, both of them wearing the same color shirts every single game. I think there's definitely some value into that. For us, and those that watch, like yourself, Coach, even recently, even no matter who's been the libero, and I know obviously it doesn't change the game when we're in rotations 1, 2, and 3, where Bergen's playing right back, whether it's Olivia or Lainey, they're both playing left back. Either of them are playing left back. But in rows 4, 5, and 6, because that's the part of the game. No matter who's the libero, who's the DS, they're in the same. They're back there at the same time. We've been playing Lainey at left back, whether she's the libero or not, and Olivia at right back, whether she's the libero or not. So those relationships in those rows, no matter who it is, it doesn't really change because we typically kind of have Lainey and left back and Olivia right back, just because we feel like there's a little more value to that. They're both better on those sides, and not like they both can't play the other, because they have in their careers, which has been, I think, an underappreciated thing for us. The fact that, sometimes you have players that are great defenders, but then you put them on the other side of the court and suddenly they're playing basketball now, versus Olivia and Lainey, they've been able to switch sides. But now that, we feel like, hey, we're getting a way more creates when they both play left and right, respectively. So that's one thing that we've been able to mitigate, is the fact that when they're back there, the same player is playing left and the same player is playing right in those rows. Obviously, rows 1, 2, and 3, the setter plays right back, so whoever's libero has to play left back. So that's kind of how we attack that. And then the big question is a great question, Coach. I feel like that you asked about how you asked earlier about like ways that we can improve. For us, we look at there, even at this point of the season, there's things we can do better on, and maybe not do better on, but there's ways we can even create more ways to attack people. So that could be another wrinkle we could put, is maybe a little tempo set to whoever's playing middle back, whether it's T. Sigler, whether it's Harper Murray back there, just because they're kind of both in there in those situations. So that would be something we could look at. Recently in some matches, we don't do it a lot, but we've also, when Bergen's in the front row blocking, and let's just say for some reason we block to our right to the other team's outside attackers, when Andy and Becca are out there, we've occasionally set them a high ball or two in the right. Because just like what you said, Coach, they're the most efficient attackers right now. Why not get them more sets? It's sometimes volleyball is complicated, but sometimes it's as simple as, hey, whoever your most efficient attacker, let's get them more swings. I can think of a couple of matches where Andy Jackson, behind the setter off 2 feet, has put down a couple of big kills. One, I remember it was a tight first set against Purdue. I think the biggest swing of the match was she killed a high ball. It was actually Harper Murray that set her the ball. And I believe the score was like 21 Nebraska, 20 Purdue. And it was one of those where they're on a run and Harper set her ball and Andy made a big kill off 2 feet, like an opposite would. And, we don't win that rally. It's 21-all. Maybe that match keeps going longer. And,
Jaylen,
anytime you play at Purdue, it's always a circus when you play there. So that when she killed that ball, that was kind of, for me, was the turning point in the match, because then we ended up winning the next 3 points, and then we kind of controlled the rest of the match after that. But trying to find ways to, that way it's not just, hey, we're setting high balls to the left.
I remember that play, and if this was an Olympic team, and I was just trying to prepare a lineup to play Italy a year from now, I would look at Andy Jackson as the opposite and bring in your freshman.
Manaya in the middle.
Well, okay, so Manaya to me is, and I've said this before, she reminds me of Elena Oden. Elena Oden was the maybe the best volleyball player I ever coached against, but she was a tremendous blocker. Manaya is a tremendous blocker. Would Nebraska consider, you've got 2 All-American blockers. You've got 2 All-American middle blockers. But we're in endgame. What would Coach Busboom-Kelly ever consider bringing Manaya off the bench to substitute for a middle blocker situationally for 1 point?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. That's part of the reason. I know a lot of people we've talked about, and some people, we're redshirting a couple players this year, and everyone especially once Becca got off to a great start of the season, and Andy is just being Andy now. There's a little bit of talks of, should we redshirt Manaya? Should we not? Because she's so talented. It'd be nice to have her here as long as she possibly can be here. But we just felt like, there's a chance we might need her, and sometimes, and how as a coach, right, sometimes it's hard to describe the situations that you might need a player. But like what you said, at the end of the game here, maybe as we go later in the, in the season here, hopefully to the end, there might be a time we do need her, whether it's for a whole match, whether it's for half a match, whether it's for 1 or 2 points, like you just mentioned. So yes, I mean, you asked about Ali Check too. There's certain situations where we feel like we're going to need some players. And, as a coach, you start prepping these kids all year, whether they're starters or not. And you don't know when that opportunity is going to come, but it's going to come eventually, and it might be, the opportunity might be 3 or 4 points, but those might be the 3 or 4 points that you need to, either keep your season going or win an important match or, win a conference or a national championship or get to a Final Four. So I look at that for all of our players that aren't redshirting this year, to where, hey, Campbell Flynn, are you ready just in case, hey, we need to hop into a double sub because maybe someone's all over our slide and we need 3 front row attackers. Ali Check, hopefully you're ready, and there's certain situations where we've done this with a bunch of these players, especially the 3 that we just mentioned, including Manaya, and, they've answered the bell. So hopefully we can do that. And I really do think Danny's not afraid to make strategic subs. And I think that's part of the reason why she's given some of these players that necessarily aren't, our starters opportunities, because we might need them in certain situations going into the tournament here.
Well, one of the things that I'm curious about of your starters, to me, it appears Rebecca Alec is statistically at least, is the better middle blocker. She's blocking more balls, but and oddly enough, Bergen's blocking statistics are as high as your right side player. So you can't say that Rebecca's blocking more balls because she's got the right side player. Bergen's blocking as many balls as Virginia. But I've never seen Nebraska flip their middles just in case they might want to match up, say, in a 5th set. Let's say you want to get Rebecca Alec on somebody that's going to start in the back row. Is that, am I thinking too much? Am I thinking?
No, I don't think you're thinking too much. I think that's a very, very plausible and strategic thought that you have, And Coach, when you say flip your middles, do you mean us spinning the dial or like switching where we start Andy and Becca?
Yeah. I mean, Becca has proven she can attack on the slide. And,
For sure.
And that raises another question. How does Rebecca Alec go from being a very good middle attacker to a exceptional middle attacker? Where did this happen? Where did the arm speed happen? Where did the quickness off one foot happen?
I think she did a really good job in the off season. Just being in great shape over the summer. I know she worked with some people on her arm swing. Brennan has done a great job with her in the spring and in the fall. I think there's a lot of factors. I think also, Coach, sometimes, hey, there's a difference between being a 4th-year player and a first-year player. Like your 4th year, you've kind of been through it all, especially for her, right? She's played in numerous USA teams. She's played in numerous Final Fours now. She's won the Big Ten now 3 times. There's just so much experience that you just can't give to somebody, right? But I think she's really worked hard on her arm swing. She's really worked hard in terms of Brennan's done a great job of trying to get her into certain spaces. And I think the one thing that she's done, and I know Coach, you're always a big proponent of just listening to you over the years of like being able to attack in all areas of the net and not just running the same route all the time. Like she's done a really good job of, okay, I'm going to run a tight quick on the setter. Okay, I get dug. The ball comes back over. It's another perfect pass. She gets away from the setter, like even in the rally. So Bergen repeats her, but it's at a different spot of the net. She can attack the slide to the pin, and she mixes up a little bit of the slide right behind the setter. So I feel like, she's done a really good job. Brennan has a saying with the middles. It's like about space and vision, so just being able to find the space along the net, find the blockers along the net that you want to attack, and like do a really nice job of not just being super vanilla with her routes, So I feel like that's one thing that they've, not just Becca, but Andy and Manaya have done a great job on this year is making sure that, they're not, they're running different routes. So I feel like that's like one important thing. And just the connection with Bergen has gotten a lot tighter, and the fact that she's opened up her arm swing to where she can get set from off the net. So now there's more passes she's available to get set on, and she's not just hey, I can only get set on good passes player.
Yeah, well, certainly the tempo is different, but I also, when I look at her, she's a better athlete right now than she was her first 3 years.
Yes. And I think it's
Yeah.
just she's gotten in awesome shape. This is like the first off season. The last few off seasons, she's had to miss our beach volleyball season because of, hey, we play a lot long into the year. Okay, she had like a little knee cleanup after her sophomore year. She's not able to do the beach season and miss parts of the spring, right? And I think people look at it like, oh, that's no big deal. She's not going to miss matches. But, a lot of physicality is not really taking care. Being physical at the end of the year is not something you really work on in September, October, November. It's something you work on January through August, and if you miss a half of that time, that's a lot of, that's a time frame that you just can't get back, and that's something we stress even in the off season is, hey, you guys we want to be physical. We want to be fresh. We want to be strong at the end of the year. It's not from lifting weights in October, it's lifting weights and conditioning and taking care of yourselves from January to August is kind of the big time for that stuff. And a lot of the times it's even in times where we're not allowed to monitor it, especially in the summer where we don't have summer access to them as much. So I think Becca's just done such a great job of all that. And she's, so much so that also just comes with time. You wish you could give every 17, 18-year-old perspective of a 22-year-old. You just can't do it. It's just trial and error. I mean, I wish as a coach, I wish I knew what I knew now when I first started coaching. I feel like I'd be a better coach, and
Well, I've always said that one of the keys to what we look for in an athlete is a person who at some point takes charge of their own development.
yes,
And that's what I see here with that person. We talked a little bit earlier before our podcast began that Nebraska has great depth, but the one player that they can't afford to lose is Harper Murray, because she has a way, she touches the ball more than anybody else other than Bergen. She can beat you with her block. She can beat you with her passing. She can beat you with back row attack. There was a little scenario in your match with Iowa that I found fascinating. 3 times in a row, and I've never seen this, Claire Amaral, the Iowa center, blocked Harper. The third time, I think a net was called.
right.
But I want to see how Harper would respond to that. Of all the Nebraska players, she plays with an edge. That's different. And I think you have to have somebody on every team who does play with an edge. But it's
Yes.
kind of like she takes it personal. And
Yeah.
I can't remember whether Nebraska called a timeout at that point or not, but do you remember the scenario I'm talking about where
I do. It was like in the
and
third set, middle of the third set, and she got blocked a couple of times, and then she got blocked in that rally. But that was the rally where there was like the double challenge that went on. So
Right.
it ended up not technically, statistically being a block, but the rally did end by her getting blocked. There's always been a thing with Harper that I always felt there's a point where and just like every kid, sometimes she's really dialed in, then she's dialed in. But there's sometimes where, she can lose a little bit of focus, or like we were talking about attention to detail. Maybe it's not as on par as it needs to be. And sometimes there's a little some mishaps happen to her where she gets blocked or she gets aced, and she almost gets irritated with herself. And that's, I think, the edge that people see. But yeah, no, I definitely think she's one that plays with an edge. She's kind of always been like, as the stakes got higher, she's always kind of performed really well, especially this season, And I think the one thing that she's I think mastering is not just letting her attack stats or attacking dictate how she feels about herself, how she's playing, taking pride in her serving and passing, taking pride in how she's playing defense, taking pride in the fact that, hey, she's able not just to be a great blocker in her zone, but can she help a little bit more in the middle? Can she help on the pipe attack? Can she be a great slide blocker? And then obviously, can she be a great off blocker defender? So I feel like she's really matured in terms of her attitude on how she's playing isn't just what she hit, but it's how she's affecting the game in all areas, because she, like you said, Coach, she touches the ball so much. She kind of has to be good in all those areas because one, she just touches the ball so much, right? It's kind of hard to have a bad day when you touch the ball so much. If you have a bad day, it's going to be tough for us to win because, Harper, it's like a basketball player that shoots it 40 times, like if you have a really bad day, it's a really bad day, then it's not great because you're going to you have so much effect on the game because of purely how many times you touch the volleyball versus you only touch the ball 10 times, whether it's good or bad, it doesn't have such a huge effect on a game, right? It's like a middle that only gets set 8 times a match, right? It's kind of it's kind of hard. Even if you hit 0, it doesn't have this win or lose feel to it versus Harper's really taken on, hey, I have a huge effect on the match, but it's not just how I hit the ball. It's about blocking, it's about the passing, it's about serving, especially, and back row defense.
Yeah. She has developed into being an exceptional player. The other left side player, Taylor Landfair, if we played the game, one of these players is not like the others. And you saw the Nebraska team in practice. I saw them doing their warm up and everything. I don't think you can appreciate how big Taylor Landfair is just on watching on video. But she is a big person, and
Yes.
she hits the ball incredibly hard. She moves differently than everybody else. I'm curious what you think about her development. She's hitting 322. Last year, I think she hit below 250. So she's improved there. She's an exceptional blocker. Do you coach her differently, or do you have to understand what things as a coach do you have to understand to be able to leverage her talent?
Yeah, I think Taylor has an interesting background, right? She was a really successful. I mean, when I say really successful, she was Big Ten Player of the Year at another school, right? And she came here. Here's the interesting thing, Coach. I don't know if you thought about this. Is this year she's playing for Danny Busboom-Kelly. Then the year before that, she's playing for John Cook. One that's going to be a Hall of Famer and one that's well on her way. The year before that, she played for Keegan Cook, who I have a lot of respect for. That could be a Hall of Famer. And then the year before that, she played for Hugh McCutcheon, who I think already is a AVCA Hall of Famer. So you go from like 4 coaches in 4 years now. So I also think like that's been a huge thing for her. 2 different schools, but 4 head coaches. Like that's hard to do, especially at schools where the schools are successful at volleyball. It's not like coaches are getting let go, So I remember she told me that once, and I knew it, but it's one thing to hear her articulate that,
Jaylen, I never thought about that.
Yeah, 4 different head coaches in 4 years, all very successful head coaches. So I think all of them are. Whether Hugh and John are obviously Hall of Famers, and I think Danny and Keegan are well on their way. So
no, but all those people would have different expectations for her.
Yes, and I think
they would see her in different roles.
Yes. So I think that's been a transition for her, especially. It was actually funny. She was the one, I remember when the day Coach Cook retired, she was the one that a lot of the girls leaned on because she's like, I've actually had this happen to me before with Hugh, right? Announcing it, that he's retiring. And the fact that she's gone through so many head coaching changes, whether it was at Minnesota or whether when she transferred here, she was one that the girls, especially the younger ones, were able to kind of lean on, if that makes sense. And she was kind of a nice outlet for them because she's like, hey, I know this might be hard, but hey, these things happen and we can still be very, very successful because she's been. So I think that why I bring that up is just the fact of, sometimes I thought Danny has been so great for her in terms of like giving her the space and the freedom. I also think she's way more open this year to certain things, being a new, even though was successful somewhere else, she was new to us last year. So just all these little interactions, especially in the spring, she was way more open with me. She was way more open with Kelly and Brennan and just her experiences. I feel like that's really helped her a ton too, to where, hey, this is not year one anymore here at Nebraska, which is, I think, helped her a ton. But no, I think Danny as a head coach, and sometimes just people fit better with people, I think Danny's really unlocked a lot of different things out of her. On the volleyball side of things, I don't think we're coaching her any differently than we did last year. We're trying to get her to hit a little more line, if I'm being honest. But other than that, the one thing she's really added to her game that I thought's really helped her, and maybe you've noticed, is that jam push shot, coach, into the block, throwing it at the block because she's so tall, right? She can almost beat the block with the speed because she doesn't need the time to elevate, because if she just gets off the ground a little and sticks her arm up, it's already like way high enough to attack. And she can kind of throw off the tempo of the block because of the fact that she can get on it fast, purely just honestly sticking her hand in the air, So we've added that to her game. And I know it sounds kind of fundamental, but she's had a bunch of really important kills for us, especially in transition, just literally throwing the ball at a late blocker and it just trickling down on their side. So, I mean, she's always going to be kind of a thumb down attacker, but we're not changing too much about her. We're just trying to get her to, hey, find these situations. There's certain situations where can you find a little more of the outside blocker, maybe a little more line, so that way people aren't sitting on your cross court shot as much. Because I think the entire country knows that she wants to hit angle. I don't think I'm breaking news to her. I mean, when we used to play against her, we used to talk about like, let's make her do this because she really wants to do this, and she's very good at it, So I think, hey, trying to get her to understand, hey, we're going to turn something that people look like a weakness for you. We're going to try to turn it into a strength, but we're also going to highlight your strengths. I don't want you to be something you're not, I don't want you to suddenly go, well, I'm just going to hit line all the time. Like, I think that would be doing her a disservice. That's like, hey, Andy Jackson's way more comfortable behind the setter. We need to work on her in front stuff. We're only going to have her run in front. It's like, no, Andy, your superpower is hitting behind the setter. Why are we going to eliminate that? So I think it's just being able to get them to understand. I think the big thing too is like getting them to understand why we're trying to get them to do this. Not necessarily force them into it, but hey, this is why you need to develop this specific thing, And I think sometimes as coaches, we assume that they should know, but you'd be surprised. Like sometimes they don't, or they don't maybe necessarily understand the why you're trying to get them to do. That would be like my big advice for young coaches is try to get them to understand the why of why you want them to do whatever you want them to do. So that way, once they understand that, there's power in it, and they're not just doing it because Jaylen said so. I always tell them, hey, are you blocking line because Jaylen said so, or because you made a read? And they all kind of know, like, I really hope the answer is not because Jaylen said so, because Jaylen's not playing anymore. I want them to, there's reasons why you're blocking, or you're doing this, or you're hitting the ball here, or you're passing the ball here, or you're setting the ball here. And I hope it's not because the coaches told you to. It's because, hey, I made a read. I got a great feel. Hey, this player's hot. These are all great reasons, not just because, oh, the coaching staff told you so, So, I feel like Taylor's really, I think Taylor's really fostered in that kind of and developed and flourished in this type of coaching. And, hopefully we can keep it going.
Well, Jaylen, I think from the just your conversations now, our people that listen to this can sense how much you care about the people that you're working with. Several years ago, somebody was asking me why is Stanford, why is Nebraska, why is Penn State, why are they so consistently Texas successful. And I said, well, they all have very good head coaches. But if you look at each of those programs has an assistant that complements the head coach. It was Denise at Stanford, was Kathy Noth for me. I think it's been you for John, and now Danny. And I don't think Nebraska's where it's at without the witness that you have made for Nebraska volleyball. The overwhelming question that we got from dozens of people is, does Jaylen Reyes want to be a head coach? And and if so, how soon will that happen? Half of those people also tacked on, please don't go. Okay, so what
Yeah.
what's your
I mean, I would say this. One day, yes. But I absolutely love what I'm doing here. I mean, my biggest focus is obviously we're trying to beat Penn State this week. And that's such a fun thing to prep for, especially here at Nebraska. Just it's like such an honor to be able to even partake in this. In my experience, this is Penn State, Nebraska is the best rivalry in college volleyball because of the history of the coaching staffs, the history of the programs, the fact that they've played in so many important matches throughout and matches that literally changed the history of the sport, So I feel like that's my focus. My focus is we got a bunch of 2027s that are on their official visits this weekend. My focus has been, how does Nebraska be successful this year, next year, and going beyond that? So I've always been like a person that's always, hey, the grass isn't always greener. For my saying is, I actually heard a great coach say this, is the grass is greener, Jaylen, where you water it. And where I'm watering it, the best, easiest place to water is where I'm standing, where it's right underneath my feet. So I'm going to do that. And if opportunities come, that's something we'll tackle as we get there. But I have no indications of wanting to leave Nebraska anytime soon. It's my opinion, it's the best volleyball program in the country. I'm definitely a little biased, but I think from the fan support to the engagement to the amount of times we're on television to, hey, any type of big event that's happening anywhere around the country. And I think some coaches or some people in volleyball are going to start to see these next few years of, there's going to be, a lot of non-conference events that are going to look like college men's basketball, especially this time of year where they have these tournaments at these random locations all over the country. Volleyball is going to start to turn that way. You'd be surprised how many events we have to say no to because we can't play in 4 events in 4 different cities on the same weekend, So I just think, like, I don't know. I'm learning a lot here. I got to learn under, in my opinion, one of the best ever in John Cook. And now I get to learn under somebody that I think she's well on her way to being, up there in terms of one of the best ever. So it's like, I'm coaching in the same place. I have the same office, but it feels like a different job to a degree. So there's not oh my gosh, this is year 8. This is year 1 under Danny. And, I know it's a very cop-out answer for me, but I would just say this. For me, there's no master plan or there's no timeline and there's no every year I'm looking at what coaching jobs are available and I'm pushing my agent to get me a job. I think there's a little bit of, hey, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I just want this place to be great. I want to try to be as awesome as I can be for the players and for Danny and for the rest of the staff and for this university and for the state. And if I do that, things will take care of itself. And let's not worry about any of that stuff, Jaylen. Let's worry about, hey, how can we make Nebraska better today than it was yesterday?
Jaylen, I think that you are the epitome of servant leadership. And I think that would be the case in whatever you were doing. And someday I'm guessing you're going to be strumming a ukulele on
That's my dad. Strum ukulele, play golf, and stand-up paddle surf each and every day. So now that, Coach, if you ask me if I wanted to do that one day, that is for sure going to be a yes, but I think that's well down the road for me.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest. And I personally appreciate how much you've given to Nebraska volleyball. I'm proud to say that you're part of the program, and I appreciate that. I also want to thank Humanex for providing the means for us to have people like Jaylen Reyes on the program. Jaylen, good luck against those Nittany Lions and the Buckeyes, and good luck in the NCAA tournament.
Thank you, Coach. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.
Inside the Coaching Mind is presented by Humanex Ventures and is pleased to be a part of the Learfield Varsity Podcast Network. If you're on Facebook, look for the Inside the Coaching Mind group and join a vibrant discussion of volleyball and leadership. TerryPettit.com is where you'll find Terry's books, writings, and downloads, as well as subscription links for all your podcast apps.